The snow was heavier than it had been all winter. Flakes danced in the wind like tiny ghosts, settling on car roofs and blanketing sidewalks in silence. New York, the city that never sleeps, felt like it had finally taken a breath. Noah Blackwell didn't drive often, not unless he needed to disappear for a while. He preferred the control, both of the wheel and the direction of his thoughts. That night, sleep had slipped through his fingers once again, so he grabbed his keys and stepped into the storm. His Bentley cut through the slush like a blade, tires whispering against the frozen pavement. Inside, jazz played low on the radio, but Noah wasn't listening. His eyes drifted between the road and the blur of city lights behind the falling snow. It was on Lexington Avenue that he saw her, a shape, small, curled up at a bus stop bench. Noah slowed the car instinctively. The headlights swept over her thin coat, hospital scrubs soaked at the hem, hair tangled with snow. Her head was bowed, her hands jammed into her pockets. One foot tapped involuntarily, probably in a weak attempt to generate warmth. Something twisted in his chest. Not pity, not interest, recognition. He pulled the car to a stop, slid into park, stepped out into the cold. The wind cut through his designer coat, but he barely noticed. He approached slowly, deliberately, the snow muffling his footsteps. "Hey," he said. She looked up with a start, her eyes wide beneath the hood. Green eyes, bloodshot from exhaustion. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said calmly, raising his hands. "But you're going to freeze out here." She blinked. "I'm fine. Just waiting for the next bus." "There's no next bus. Everything's shut down. No trains, no cabs. You're sitting here in a snowstorm. I don't need—" "Help," he interrupted gently. "Yeah, you do." She straightened, hugging her arms tighter around herself. "I don't even know you." Noah nodded once. "Then let's fix that. I'm Noah. And you are?" "Ivy," she said reluctantly. He pulled off his long black coat and handed it to her. "Put this on, Ivy." She hesitated, then reached out and slipped it over her shoulders. It felt heavy and warm around her frame. "I can take you home," he said. "Where do you live?" "Harlem," she said, "but it's far. Too far to walk." "I'll drive. I'll sit in the back," she added quickly, as if trying to regain some sense of control. "Fine by me." They walked silently to the Bentley. He opened the passenger side door, letting her climb in first. The interior was a sanctuary of warmth, leather seats, soft lighting, a hum of heated air. As she sank into the seat, Ivy exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. He got in on the other side and put the car in gear. For a while, they drove in silence. The snow-covered streets were empty, haunted by flickering street lamps and the occasional blinking stoplight. Ivy clutched his coat around her. It smelled clean, like cedar and something she couldn't place, like peace. "Thanks," she said eventually, barely audible over the heater. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "No one should be left in the cold." She glanced at him. Most people would have driven past. "I'm not most people." He said it without arrogance. It was simply a fact. Ivy Carter had grown up learning how to survive. A mother lost to illness. A father gone before she turned 12. Raised by her older sister, who sacrificed her 20s to make sure Ivy got through school. She'd always been grateful. Always the one to give, never to ask. Nursing wasn't just a job. It was her way of giving back to the world that had taken so much from her. But it was also exhausting. That night, she'd worked a double. Skipped lunch, skipped dinner, barely made it to the bus stop before her legs gave out. She didn't want help. She wanted rest. But what she got was him. Noah Blackwell had built his first software startup in college. Sold it before he turned 23. By 30, he had more money than he knew what to do with. But no amount of success ever replaced the silence left behind by his mother's death. She'd been a nurse too. Strong, gentle, brave. She used to sit with dying patients long after her shift ended. Used to hold his hand when storms frightened him. After she passed, Noah learned to shut the world out. Shut his heart down. Deals, numbers, power. Those were things he could control. But love was messy, vulnerable, dangerous. And then came Ivy. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse. Ivy stepped in cautiously, her shoes leaving wet prints on the polished floor. The space was warm, soft, elegant. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a snowy cityscape. A fireplace flickered in the corner. "You can take the guest room," he said, nodding toward the hallway. "Clothes in the dresser. Bathroom stocked." She paused. "Why are you doing this?" He met her eyes. "Because I know what it's like to be cold and alone, and I have more space than I know what to do with." She nodded slowly, lips trembling. "No funny business." He gave a soft laugh. "None. You can lock the door if it makes you feel better." She disappeared down the hall. He stood alone for a while, staring at the snow falling outside. Then, without thinking, he stepped into the kitchen. 15 minutes later, Ivy reappeared in oversized sweatpants and a hoodie. He was standing at the stove, stirring something in a pot. She blinked. "Are you cooking?" "Ramen," he said. "I figured you might be hungry." She sat at the counter. He handed her a bowl and chopsticks. Steam rose from the broth. She took a bite, closed her eyes, let out a long sigh. "This is better than hospital cafeteria food," she murmured. "I should hope so," he said, smiling. They didn't talk much more that night, but when she went to sleep in the guest room, her body finally relaxed. And for the first time in years, so did his heart. Ivy woke slowly the next morning, wrapped in sheets softer than any she'd ever felt. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The silence, the warmth. It wasn't her apartment, not with its cracked radiator and flickering kitchen light. Then she remembered the snow, the bus stop, the stranger with storm-gray eyes. She sat up slowly, heart thudding. On the nightstand sat a glass of water, a phone charger, and a small folded note. "There's coffee in the kitchen. Take what you need. Noah." She smiled, unsure why. The hallway was quiet as she padded barefoot toward the kitchen. Noah wasn't there, but the coffee machine was still warm. She poured herself a mug, trying not to imagine what it meant that a billionaire had left her alone in his home, with no questions, no conditions. She didn't take advantage. She didn't linger. By mid-morning, she was gone, leaving his coat folded on the couch. But she took the note. 3 days passed. Ivy didn't hear from him. Didn't expect to. Still, she thought about him, more than she wanted to admit. Then, while helping out at a free health clinic hosted by the hospital, she felt it. A presence. She turned, and there he was, standing at the back of the room like he didn't belong there, like he didn't want to intrude, but couldn't stay away. Noah's eyes found her through the crowd, and stayed there. "I didn't follow you," he said when she finally approached him. "Sure looked like it," she teased, folding her arms. He offered the ghost of a smile. "I fund this clinic every winter. Been doing it for years. I just didn't expect to see you here." "I volunteer," she said simply. "People need help." His gaze softened. "That's what my mother used to say." She blinked. "Your mother?" She was a nurse, the kind who gave more than she had. Places like this, she lived for them. I hated them as a kid. But now, he glanced around the room, watching a young girl hug her mom after receiving a toy from the donation box. "Now I think I get it." "You never told me that," she said. There's a lot I haven't told you, he murmured. They stood in silence, surrounded by movement. Then he said, "Would you like to get coffee?" No agenda, no obligations. She hesitated, then nodded. Their coffee turned into an hour-long conversation on a bench near Central Park, her hands wrapped around a paper cup, his body turned toward her like he didn't know how not to listen. They didn't talk about wealth or legacy or anything grand. They talked about insomnia, about bad cafeteria food, about a book they had both started and never finished. And something in both of them shifted. Over the next few weeks, they kept accidentally crossing paths. Sometimes in the hospital cafeteria. Sometimes she'd receive a call. "A car is outside. Don't worry, it's just a ride. You can say no." But she never did. Noah was always waiting somewhere quiet, somewhere peaceful, with hot chocolate or her favorite ginger cookies. He remembered things she barely said. He didn't flirt. He didn't touch her hand. He simply showed up. And slowly, Ivy started to wonder what it would feel like if he never stopped. One night, as they sat side by side on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum, the city glowing behind them, she turned to him. "You're not what I expected." He raised a brow. "What did you expect?" "A man with a private elevator and a black Bentley to be colder." "And what are you?" he asked, voice low. "I've been told I'm too kind for my own good." He looked at her for a long time. "It's not kindness. It's humanity." She smiled. "Same thing." His eyes dropped. "Then maybe I'm just trying to remember mine." Behind thick glass and walnut-paneled walls, there was a photo that no one else ever noticed. His mother, smiling in her nurse's uniform. It was the only personal thing in the entire building. And beside it a new one. Ivy, not posed, not polished. Just her, laughing at something unseen, sunlight in her hair. Noah hadn't told her it was there. Just like he hadn't told her what he had started doing behind the scenes. He found her student debt, paid it off. Silently, he made a donation to the hospital's underfunded clinic, enough to keep it afloat for years. Anonymously, he wasn't trying to buy her. He was trying to make space for her light to keep shining, because he remembered what it looked like when that light died, in his mother's eyes, near the end. He would never let Ivy burn out the same way. One night, Ivy returned to his place after a long shift. She didn't knock anymore. There was tea on the stove, a note that read, "Take the blanket. I know you're cold." She curled up on the couch, her hair damp from the snow, eyes already drifting shut. Noah stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching her breathe. He never told her what it meant to him. But in that silence, everything was said. The snow had melted. The city had moved on. But inside Noah Blackwell's penthouse, winter remained. It wasn't the cold. He could afford warmth. It was the quiet. And Ivy felt it too. They lived together, in a rhythm that resembled intimacy. Her shoes by the door, her tea in the cabinet, her laugh sometimes echoing off the walls. But there were borders he never crossed. He never kissed her goodnight, never held her in bed, never told her how he felt. And that silence, once gentle, was turning sharp. One evening, after a particularly draining shift, Ivy arrived to find the lights low, a soft playlist humming in the background. Her favorite book rested on the couch where she'd left it. On the table, dinner was waiting, warm, untouched. But he wasn't there. She found him in his study, the door slightly ajar. Noah stood with his back to her, staring at a photo on his desk, his mother's. Beside it, Ivy's picture sat, still, framed. She leaned against the doorframe, hesitant. "You always look at that photo when something's wrong." He didn't turn. "It helps me remember." "Remember what?" "That people like her." He hesitated. "Like you still exist." Ivy took a breath. Noah. He turned, finally, met her eyes, but his face was unreadable. "What are we doing?" she asked softly. "What do you mean?" "This," she said, gesturing between them. "We live together. We together. But we don't touch. We don't say things. I don't even know if you want me here or if I'm just convenient." His jaw clenched. "I want you here." "Then why does it feel like I'm a guest in your life?" Silence. "Noah," her voice broke. "Why won't you let me in?" He looked down, and that was her answer. "I love you," she whispered. The words hung there, raw and bare. Noah's breath caught, but he said nothing. No movement. No words. Just stillness. She nodded slowly, blinking fast. "It's okay," she said quietly. "You don't have to say it. But I can't keep waiting for a man who doesn't know if he's allowed to feel." She turned, walked out, didn't slam the door, didn't scream, just disappeared into the night. Noah stood in the hallway for hours after she left, one hand on the doorframe, the other in a fist. Every muscle in his body begged him to run after her, but fear was older than logic, and he let her go. The days after were colorless. Meetings blurred. Investors called. Deadlines loomed. He ignored them all. His assistant tried 3 times to confirm a deal with Tokyo. On the 4th, Noah simply said, "Cancel it." "Sir, cancel it." He stood, put on his coat, and left. He drove through the city aimlessly, retracing every step, every coffee shop, every corner where she might be. But when he returned to her hospital, she was gone, transferred. No forwarding information, no message, just gone. He stood at the front desk, heart hollow. "Are you family?" the nurse asked. He paused. "No," he whispered. "I guess not." That night, he sat in the center of his apartment, the fireplace off, the windows dark. Her scent still lingered in the throw blanket on the couch. Her teacup still sat by the sink. He looked around at the space once filled with her presence and realized he'd never called it home. But she had. He whispered to the darkness, "She was the only thing that made me feel human." And it echoed, and it hurt, because silence was no longer peaceful. It was punishment. Meanwhile, Ivy had tried to forget. She moved upstate, took a new job at a quiet hospital, bought a small plant for her window, rebuilt her world. But some nights, she still dreamed of him. The way he looked at her when he wasn't looking. The care behind every word he didn't say. She had loved him, still did. But she couldn't live waiting for a man to become brave. One morning, a phone call came. Her aunt had suffered a mild stroke, and Ivy returned to the city to care for her. She rented a small place near the Upper East Side, told herself it was temporary. But as she wandered the snowy streets, she found herself stopping in front of a tiny flower shop she used to love. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped in. She wasn't sure why she came. Maybe memory, maybe longing, maybe fate. And there he was, Noah, back turned, lifting a stem of white tulips from the display. She froze. He turned slowly. Their eyes met. Time stopped. He stepped forward, careful, not to overwhelm, not to assume, but to hope. "You're coming with me," he said, voice low. The same words from that freezing night at the bus stop. But this time, they carried weight. They carried truth. "If you still want to," he added. Her breath caught. She nodded. "I never stopped waiting." He reached for her hand. Not urgently. Not like he was afraid she'd disappear. But reverently. Like he knew how precious it was to be allowed to hold her again. Their fingers locked. And the cold didn't matter anymore. Because this time love spoke. And he finally answered. 6 months had passed. 6 months since Ivy said yes with a single nod in that flower shop. Since she let him take her hand again. This time with the quiet certainty of someone who'd learned what absence really meant. But Noah had changed. Not with grand declarations or flashy gestures, but with presence. He spoke more, touched more, felt more. She had never asked for a proposal, never expected one. So when he led her to the garden of his childhood home on a soft summer morning and got down on one knee, she gasped, not because it was surprising, but because it was him, the man who had once feared feeling, now trembling, eyes glassy, asking not to be loved, but to love fully, openly, without condition. The wedding was simple. A linen canopy, a narrow aisle flanked by ivy vines and golden lanterns. Close friends, old patients, hospital volunteers. No cameras, no headlines. Among the guests sat a frail elderly man Ivy once helped during a fundraiser, a man Noah had noticed months ago, the night he first truly saw her. The man stood to speak. "She's always been an angel," he said, voice trembling. "Now she's found her guardian." Noah's vows were written by hand. No teleprompter, no rehearsed charm. "I didn't know how to love before you," he said, voice low. "But every day with you I learn." Ivy touched his cheek, her own voice catching. "We'll learn together." They didn't kiss right away. They just stared at each other. Two souls that had circled the same city, the same silence, until finally finding home. Then softly they kissed, and it felt like beginning again. That night, the reception flickered with candlelight. Noah danced, not perfectly, but joyfully. He laughed, unrestrained and real. Ivy whispered jokes in his ear, and he leaned into everyone like they were secrets made of gold. Later, they curled on the porch of their new home, wrapped in the same blanket he'd once draped over her shoulders that frozen night. A summer storm rumbled softly in the distance. The air was thick with jasmine. "I never thought a night at a bus stop would lead here," Ivy whispered, resting her head against his chest. Noah kissed her hair. "That night," he murmured, "I didn't save you." She looked up, confused. He turned her face gently toward him. "You saved me." Moral of the story. Sometimes love doesn't crash through the door. It waits outside in the snow, silent, patient, hoping we'll notice it. It speaks not in grand gestures, but in ramen at 2 a.m., in handwritten notes, in showing up without being asked. And sometimes, the people who save us aren't the ones who shout. They're the ones who whisper, "You're coming with me." And mean, this time, into a life of love. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminded you that even the quietest moments can change everything, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. Because love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it starts with a warm coat and the courage to hold someone's hand. Until next time, stay warm, stay kind, and remember, even the smallest moment can lead to forever.